Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining today. This is your host Nino inviting you to another adventure with Apple Unix. Apple's famous love affair at the end of the 1980s and beginning of the 1990s, in which it sought to combine the intuitiveness of its classical Mac shell with the stability for which Unix was already renowned at the time. Different sources state different reasons for this experiment, which ultimately failed. The ones are saying that Apple was more concerned with participating in government tenders, and at the time, the United States government was giving preference to Unix software. So if you wanted a part of that large cake, you better have a Unix to offer. But there is also the technical perspective that while System 5 and 6 were beautiful, it became more and more obvious that some sort of tech refresh would be needed. It was not imperative and not sudden, but it seemed that something would have to be done as computers developed into entities that should be endowed with greater security, better performance, better multitasking, better stability, and so on and so forth. And these were all things which, after all, Unix offered. So why not? Why not create a Frankensteinian monster, one could also say, for the two systems were not connected neatly into a coherent whole, but it was more so that the classical Macintosh parts were running in a fashion of para-virtualization on top of the Unix parts. The two worlds remained separate and felt separate, and while Apple systems were famous for being intuitive, Apple Unix isn't particularly. I have demonstrated that in another video, but today we shall briefly revisit that again. In essence, the two components behaved like oil and water and did not quite mix. I still was very curious though, and fortunately I came along Mendelssohn.org where I found the application AUXrunner. And that is nothing else but an encapsulation of the famous virtualization software Qemu, together with a working Apple Unix install. You just download it, unpack it, and run it. The trouble was, though, that the system arrived rather nude. There wasn't really anything much in terms of applications. And in a previous video, I was more focusing on how to refill the Unix side of affairs. That is, how to procure things like a more modern C compiler, a Lisp system, another Lisp system, a basic interpreter, a better editor, and so on and so forth. So all of these things were lovely and nice, but still primitive Unixy things. But they worked comparatively easily because the system arrives networked. It can ping internet addresses and it can connect to my host computer. So if I wanted to transfer a file from my host machine to the guest machine, I would simply cat it into a netcat listener. So my host machine, my MacBook Air, would wait for a connection, and then I would telnet to it from the Apple Unix machine in order to receive the file. Here you see an example of a transfer of a Chipmunk basic interpreter that works, by the way, amazingly, as you shall see in a second. Yet here, two difficulties appeared. First, classical Macintosh files are not of such nature as you're used to in DOS or Unix. They are not just clean binary entities with a beginning and an ending, but they have things like attributes. They are having a resource fork and other weirdnesses about them, which if they are lost in transit, then your application will not work. So what to do? Two things were apparently done by people. The one is to package applications as HQX files. That was an archive type that was essentially ASCII. So if I were to have a look at this Chipmunk basic thing, by the way, there is no telnet over here. So if I wanted to to look into Chipmunk Basic, I absolutely could, and it would show me a little introduction and then letter salad. For that way, you could post it over the networks at the time, and you see a little bit of an explanation, which upon unpacking would be ignored, and afterwards the ASCII letter salad that would be transferred neatly even across links that were not 8-bit clean, that is, links that would damage some bytes, for it was sticking to printable characters. And that was a reliable method that the Unix world also knows under UU encode and UU decode. The other thing, however, is what do you do with an HQX file? So you get it there, you can read it. Well, you need an unarchiver, and the most famous one is called Stuffit. The trouble with Stuffit is, though, how do you get Stuffit on the target system if you already have difficulties with getting any Macintosh file outside of this very specific file system? And one way to do so is if you can get Stuffit onto an Macintosh formatted CD-ROM, that is one with an HFS file system or HFS plus, one that you cannot open on your modern Mac OS machine. And an excellent source to do so is the Apple UX reference archive by Mr. Fahrenheit, a very friendly gentleman who was giving me hints that I should really have a look at it. But me being dense, I needed a while to take the hint. It's available on macintoshgarden.org, and you will absolutely not regret having that. It is chock full of useful applications, including Stuffit, but so much other material too that you even might not need Stuffit all that much. The other place where I found Stuffit prepackaged on an ISO file, the Stuffit expander, so you can't encode, but you can decode, which is what we need, is on winworldpc.com, where there is the title called Apple CD-ROM Title Sampler. This title sampler is total trash, but it also contains a CD called Apple Demo Application CD Business Productivity. And there, in the archiver section, is also a CD-ROM that you can use for transfer into your Apple Unix machine. But transfer how? It's not exactly like I'm going to glue this disk to the screen, right? So how do we get that into AUX? And here comes the fact that if you unpack the AUXrunner application, as I have done here, originally it's 7 GB, but I stuffed it further and it became 9. It is also not only an app, it's also a folder. So if I press and hold Control and click on the mousepad, I'm having the option to show the package contents, which, as I do, is giving me a whole file system hierarchy. And down there is this particular script called Qemu-aux-single.command. Now, you certainly can rely that this is not just a little character study, but that is the actual thing which is running the whole show. You can start it even from here. You don't need to start the AUX application from outside. And if you were to open it with a text editor, then that is what it looks like. So you are starting the Qemu system M68K virtualizer with a lot of options. And finally, I added these two lines. Pay regard to them and copy them, adjusting, of course, the CD-ROM image that you would like to have included. So I saw that there is a bunch of disk images mentioned before, but finally, there was no CD-ROM taken yet by anything, and that meant it was free, and that meant I could take it. And that's where you can bind in your material. So this is how you get these nice ISO things into AUX. And now, if I double click the AUX single command, an interpreter window will open, a command line window will open, and Qemu, as you see, will start. It's the same as happening if you double click the AUXrunner application. I just wanted to show you that it really is that script. And now I would like to maximize it via Ctrl Alt F for full screen so that you can see the booting process better. It is rather entertaining that first it seems to start some simple Macintosh environment until it then, that is now, proceeds to really move towards the AUX system. And goodness did I find things. Both on WinWorld PC and on this resources CD-ROM, there was quite some material that did enrich the Macintosh side of this machine, and I can proudly say it has now become very useful. So this is the CD-ROM, and this is the set of programs that I have acquired. So one of the weird things when you boot the system is that you're having here a Unix disk that is just named / for the top of the root hierarchy and a Macintosh HD. Initially, I thought that you're having only one hard disk, but looking at the Qemu command, it seems that you're having two. And I have now taken the liberty to include this AUX reference archive. And if we now go under Essential Tools and Software, then you shall find there everything that you might ever need. And over there, under compression, we are having bin hex, we are having DD expand, and we're having the stuffit expanders. So you're having here really a lot of software, despite this being an AUX 3 system and this being called an AUX 2 reference archive. Trust me, it is the right thing. I needed some time to understand that. Mr. Fahrenheit, who posted it, turned out to be a very patient person and continued dropping me hints that I should have a look at it. And I'm infinitely grateful for having it, as it alone satisfied really all my needs and allowed me to get on my Macintosh hard disk also quite some useful applications. Though with some pride, I must say that I managed, after I obtained the Stuffit expander, to get the Chipmunk basic all by myself from the HQX archive. So this really works the way you would imagine. So 10 for I is equal to 1 to 10, 20 print the squares, 30 next I, run, and there you go. You actually have a variation of this even nowadays for iOS. And if you have an iPhone, you can enjoy such pleasures even in modern days. So yes, quit without saving. There we have Chipmunk Basic. But as I was exploring the strange system, and here under the Apple, these, typical Apple programs, one was missing, one I thought that I should see. There was no Paint program, right? I mean, there is a Notepad, but there was no Paint. So I managed to finally track down over one of those weirdly archived internet thingies a German copy of Mac Paint. It should work just like the English copy. And starting that, I quickly was met by one of those famous incompatibilities. You see how it is drawing somehow just in the upper half of the screen things, but not really where you would expect it. So in essence, Mac Paint seems to be incompatible with AUX. Oh, that was marvelously underwhelming, and I wanted to have a more decent Paint program, but I don't want to actually save anything. I just want to get out of here. Very good. And here the Apple AUX CD-ROM, for instance, turned out very helpful. I don't even need to install the software. I can just simply, for instance, go under Graphics, And I can go here to Mac Paint 2. And this is Claris Mac Paint 2, which looks different from the classical Macintosh Paint program, but which works the way you would expect it to do. Yeah, beautiful smiley. Well, people were doing more than that on their machines, right? And indeed, what you can also do, and there you might have also a look at WinWorld PC, you can absolutely run Word and Excel. So this really turns AUX into a way more useful office workhorse. Wouldn't huh, wouldn't you say? We can do everything we're normally doing in Word. For instance, it's strange that it is a script called New York. I would much rather expect times. Maybe times should be a little bit bigger. But it is just a little bit like some weird parallel world to what we have seen around that time in the Windows 3 world. We don't only have Word, we also have Excel. So you could actually also use it for spreadsheet calculations, right? I wonder whether this early Excel could do this little trick where you are catching two cells together and then letting it expand them. Oh, but that is quite wonderful. And then I can say here, would it catch the formula 2? I have not tried that yet. A1 times 2. And it does. Most fascinatingly, it just continued the formula and we are having here a multiplication table for 2. Ah, little kids will love that, I'm sure. But we do have, indeed, the most relevant Microsoft Office apps. There is also something strange called PowerPoint. I'm sure that's not a very relevant program. I'm sure it doesn't have any future. I'm sure you have never heard of it. So why should we ever bother with it? What we also have here are some strange heaps of paper. Now that might be some training material or whatever it is. Aha, introducing Excel. Now this is working. And if you look at it, originally it just lies there and cannot do anything. I'm going to quit HyperCard now. But yes, apparently it can do that too. Very lovely. There is, of course, most incredibly also other materials such as Photoshop. Of course, we assume that you have a license. And starting that, you can pick bitmap and you can again resort to drawing smileys, just like with Paint, only with a program that is a way bigger overkill. Yeah, love it. But you can now start your own fashion magazine, right? So that way, ladies and gentlemen, with a few touches to the Qemu startup command, you can bind in CD-ROM images, and then you can proceed to acquiring all sorts of graphical Macintosh software that would make your life easier. But I also discovered a new quirk, which I just want to show you as final entertainment that shows you how these two worlds are not fully connected. For if I look at the root file system, in theory, I should also be able to access the Macintosh subdivision of it if I go to Mac. And if I now go to sys, I'm having here the startup system folder and the system folder. If I go to the system folder, and you see I have to use, of course, backspaces for the white space in file names, but would you call that intuitive for, normal people? That is weird. Here, however, I have the subfolder preferences. And if I go to preferences, then I'm seeing here various program preferences. Some of them may cause startup notifications that you find annoying. However, you will not be able to delete them. In particular, these Acrobat reader preferences. Yes, that is a TM trademark symbol. Very disingenuous to have that here on our command line. If you wanted to delete that, you would not be able to reach it. So let's say let's try it then in quotes. Reader prefs non-existent. I can also try single quotes. You will see nothing will change. Reader prefs non-existent. If I say ls, there are again the Acrobat reader prefs. Now, you might be tempted to say, well, then get rid of them from the Macintosh HD. How hard can that be? Excellent point. So we're here in the Macintosh HD. We have the system folder in which I was, but we do not have any preferences, right? If I save my present working directory, it is system folder preferences. Here I am in the system folder, but there are no preferences. So essentially, these files are somehow removed from your control, and neither the system folder is showing them, nor is the Unix system capable of working with them. And there are many such little inconsistencies. Nonetheless, they shall not prevent us from playing with the Macintosh. And today, as opposed to last time, I would like to end this adventure with shutting down in Unix, which would be shut down H0, and it takes a longer time than the corresponding graphical command, which I have shown in my other video. Very well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining today, and I hope to greet you here soon for further adventures. If not yet a member of our illustrious and friendly club, please consider joining it. Until we meet again, I'm wishing you a wonderful time. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for waiting until AUX decides to shut down. Very well. And from me, goodbye.